Hey guys, today I have a pumpkin dessert for you made from squash. We are just a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving, and today I have a pumpkin pie alternative for you. I don't love pie. It's not my favorite thing. Pie crust is a little bit of a nemesis for me. Since I don't love pie, I've not made a lot of pie crust. But this pumpkin pudding takes place of your traditional pumpkin pie, and I think it's a whole lot better personally, but it's also super easy and you get to learn how to make pudding from scratch. No boxes here. And did you know that the pumpkin puree you get at the grocery store in the can is actually made from squash? Squash, like a butternut squash or this honey nut squash, has a better and sweeter consistency than pumpkin. So pumpkin pie puree manufacturers actually get away with putting squash in those cans and calling it pumpkin. So you've been eating squash pie all those years. So we're gonna make a squash/pumpkin pudding today. So let's get to it. So we're going to take our honey nut squash and cut it in half. We're going to remove the seeds in the pulp. You could use any sweet-ish winter squash. A butternut squash would be great, but I love these little honey nuts. They're super sweet and very tasty. And this is about what we'll need for our pudding. They're so tiny. Then we're going to rub each squash with a little butter to give it a little extra flavor while it's roasting in the oven. We're just going to spread that like it's toast. And then a little pinch of salt, because we're always going to want to season everything. Finally, we're going to spread it with a little bit of brown sugar, again, to help with a little extra flavor, a little caramelization in the oven. And then on a baking sheet it goes at 400 degrees. After about 35 minutes, the squash was soft, and you can see from this little paring knife going in that it was very tender. We're going to set this aside to cool. Now we're going to get a medium saucepan on the stove, and we're going to put a cup of milk and a cup of half and half. We're going to add a third of a cup of brown sugar and about a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Also a pinch of salt, about a quarter of a teaspoon. We're going to whisk that together and then put in our squash that we scooped out and mashed. Stir that up really nice and good to combine. And we're going to turn the heat on and get that up to a simmer. While the milk mixture is heating up, we're going to combine some cornstarch and 2 egg yolks, and we're going to whisk that into a nice smooth paste. Once the milk mixture is come to a pretty hard simmer, we're going to take 1 ladleful of the milk liquid and mix that into our egg and cornstarch mixture. This is going to help temper the egg so it doesn't curdle once we pour it into the pot. Once that's all nice and mixed, we're going to whisk it into the warm liquid. The cornstarch is going to do its job to thicken as soon as it hits this warm liquid. And we're just going to cook for another minute, stirring well while that yolk cooks. And then it is done when the pudding is nice and thick and creamy. We're going to layer this with some cookies, and I've decided to use Biscoff because I love them, but you could use any kind of spice cookie, a ginger snap, maybe one of those hard amaretti cookies would be great. We're just going to create a bottom layer of the Biscoff cookies, and then we're going to layer it with about half of the pudding mixture, which is still warm. We're going to smooth that out so it's all around the edges, and we are going to layer on another layer of Biscoff. Finally, we're going to pour the rest of the pudding over the top of that second layer of Biscoff cookies and smooth it out just like the first layer. And then we're going to cover this with plastic wrap and get it into the fridge. Make sure that plastic wrap is touching the surface of the pudding so it doesn't create a gross skin. Into the fridge. Let's make some whipped cream. We're going to take 1 cup of heavy whipping cream And we're going to add 2 tablespoons of maple syrup because we are fancy. And then we are going to whip this cream, and we're looking for stiff peaks. And I should have learned my lesson that I really need to use an electric mixer for this amount of whipped cream. And so we move to use some power. And we're just going to whip this until it becomes thick and it will hold stiff peaks. All right, our pudding is set. I had mine in there overnight, but you could get away with having this in the fridge probably for 4 to 6 hours. We're just waiting for the pudding to cool down completely and set. So we're going to now go ahead and top this with some whipped cream. Now you could just dollop the whipped cream on with a spoon or just spread it with a spatula. I'm feeling fancy today, so I got out my piping bag and a star tip, and I am going to just pipe this whipped cream on so it looks pretty. And this will be really nice for your Thanksgiving table. It'll look a little extra special. But again, you don't need to do this step. You could just simply use a spoon. We have a little bit left, so this could go in coffee. That would be delicious. And then when I first recipe tested this, Sean's feedback was that it could use a little crunch factor, and I agree. So I went ahead and I toasted some pecans, and you know if you've watched my channel that I say you must toast your pecans, put them in the oven at 350 for about 7 minutes, and then you make them extra crunchy and extra flavorful and nutty. And we're just gonna spread these over the top, sprinkle these over the top like this. Now, if you have somebody with a nut allergy, you could crumble up some extra cookies and put them over the top right before serving so that they're still crunchy when people dig in. And I do like pecans a lot, so I'm gonna go a little bit heavy here. And there you go. There is our pumpkin pie pudding made of squash. This looks delicious, and I am going to give it a try now. Now, another way you could serve this, if you were being even fancier than me, is you could serve this in smaller cups. So you could layer it sort of in individual cups so that people could have their own fancy dessert, but this works just fine. Let's take a bite. So what I love about this is the pudding is not super sweet, but you get that nice pumpkin spice and the pumpkin flavor, the squash flavor. The cookies add an extra layer of the spice from the cookie itself and an extra layer of sweetness. They get soft as they're sitting in there. So like a banana pudding might be with vanilla wafers, that's what happens with the cookies in the middle here. And the crunch of the pecans is so good. And I love this maple whipped cream. It's not super sweet, but you get that hint of maple on the end. All in all, this is a fantastic Thanksgiving dessert. And I would say give it a shot this year and maybe replace pumpkin pie if you can get away with it with this pumpkin pudding. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up and click subscribe and that little bell button to be alerted when I launch a new video. Thank you so much for watching. Now go have some fun in the kitchen.